My question is first going to Professor Varsori. You were speaking as a historian, how things were working or not working. What I'd like to know is, there was something which we called pentagonale, and to some extent it has something to do with German unification. And it's also that Andreotti was saying, I love Germany so much that I'm happy there too. That's the first question. Second one goes to Professor O'Neill. We are used now to Merkel and Germany bashing for the last 5 years or so. And you were referring to the fact that the agreement with Turkey and the European Union was mainly worked out by Merkel and to some extent by the Netherlands. That might be true or maybe is true. But on the other hand, the decision is being made by the European Council. So it's not just Germany, so the others have to agree. So it's a multilateral decision, and it's not just the hegemon, German hegemon. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, thank you for your question. I had in the past the opportunity to work in the Andreotti archives, and I wrote about his foreign policy, both as a foreign minister and later on as prime minister. And the remark by Andreotti was not exactly in that way. It was a bit different, and of course, this remark was done on the occasion of a Festa dell'Unità, So one of these initiative by the Italian Communist Party, and it was, I think, in 1983, if I am correct. And Andreotti just said, if there is some pan-German tendency, I am very much worried about that, which was not exactly. Then later on, it was changed by newspapers, and of course, Andreotti didn't deny that, because he liked, to be very witty, and so it was it was better, when there was the German unification, when there was the fall of the Berlin Wall, during the early period, I would say that the first 2 months, Andreotti was a bit skeptical, and he was really worried, like Mitterrand, like Margaret Thatcher, like everybody else. Not for Germany in itself, And he explained that. And he was a man of the Cold War. And of course, for him, the Cold War was something bad, but at the same time, it was good. Because the Cold War had given Europe 50 years of stability. So for him, okay, it's better not to move, As we say, quieta non movere in Latin, So it's better not to move anything. And of course, his worries were, if we have the German unification, there may be the problem of changing the European borders. And so he thought not only about, the Polish-German border, but he thought, what about the Italian-Austrian border? What about the Italian-Yugoslav border? And there was a national interest. So I think this was the main reason of his, worries, skepticism, and so on. Then he changed very quickly his mind. He was a realpolitiker, he was very realist, And when he understood that, Germany's reunification is something which is going to happen, in a few months. So we can do anything, to do that. There was a very interesting meeting between Andreotti and Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher thought that he could rely on Andreotti in order to stop, the German reunification. And he told Andreotti or better, Andreotti was now convinced that it was possible to have the German reunification on two conditions, which were obvious. The first was the American must stay in Europe, so NATO, the American guarantee, and the second was more European political integration. With these two conditions, Italy can accept the German reunification without no problem. It was interesting the fact that Margaret Thatcher told Andreotti in this private conversation, well, you are too optimistic, you think that you will have a European Germany. On the contrary, you will have a German Europe. Of course, Andreotti was skeptical, said, okay, don't mind. And he didn't reply, He was silent, and later on he accepted everything. Of course, there were anyway some problems later on with the question of Yugoslavia. The Italians were very much against the recognition of the independence of Croatia and Slovenia, and were compelled to change their mind very quickly as a consequence of Germany's foreign policy, and of the Vatican's foreign policy, totally of Germany.
Thank you, Professor. Professor O'Neill, please.
Are you picking me up? Yeah, okay. First of all, I did say in my presentation that I was very much aware of the contribution Germany has made to the whole European project. I hope I wasn't engaging in what you call Germany bashing, but there was, widely reported at the time of that European Council last month, a great deal of concern amongst other members of the European Council that the decision had been made, if you like, behind closed doors. I know that Prime Minister Cameron reported when he came back that, he was taken very much by surprise by a deal which looked as if it had been a fait accompli. So that's the first point, the historical accuracy of what was actually said or who made the decision, I think, is on the record, although we don't yet have the papers. Secondly, in a sense, in mitigation of Angela Merkel, you could say she had to take some action because obviously this was a major pressure on Germany, on its finances, and indeed on public opinion. And she had been badly let down by the rest of the European Union, who were reluctant. One has to acknowledge that what else was she supposed to do when nobody was being prepared to take their whatever a fair share of migrants is. But nobody was prepared to do what Germany had done, which was to say, we recognize this as an issue and we have to respond to it and we have to open our borders. And I think Germany's already got 1 million at least migrants. The United Kingdom isn't even yet meeting 25,000. So I'm not in a position to bash Germany on that score. But I think my point is that there is a feeling, I think, in the European Union that, and this will certainly be exaggerated, increased if Britain does leave, that this is very much a show that is run increasingly by the German Foreign Office and by the German Chancellor's office. For whatever reason, there is a reticence amongst many of the new member states to be critical of Germany. Varoufakis made this point, in his presentation on BBC television 10 days ago, that you don't offend the person who is providing most of the resources. And there is a reticence. The European Council is supposed to represent every member state equally. And there is a sense in which Germany has a monopoly of political power in that council. That's not a criticism of Germany. All I'm saying is we maybe need to think about the way we restructure I think there's a case for a major overhaul of the European Union institutions. I think the British Brexit issue, the basket of 4 reforms that Cameron was asking for was small beer, as we say in the UK. I think the European Union has far more issues than the 4 issues that were raised by David Cameron. That was anyway just a response by him to a crisis in his own political party and to the sorts of things that the British media were saying about migration and about, we don't any longer have control of our own borders. I think the European Union has far bigger problems than just those that are, addressed or raised by the British in the renegotiations, so-called. I don't think anything was renegotiated. There were, as the German commentator said, a bit of extra sausage, just so Mr. Cameron could get, an agenda that he felt he could defend in the debate, although he's not defended it particularly well. He's only made one major speech on the issue, and the Labour Party is completely withdrawn from the scene altogether. So I'm not, in any sense, denigrating Germany's contribution. Germany has been and will be a major player. I just think we need to look at the balance of power in the Council, as in the other institutions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Other questions, please?
Thank you. My name is Mr. Levy. I'm from Israel, and the question is for you, Professor O'Neill. I heard your fascinating lecture about the European Union, and I hear system material and read, and I don't hear enough of the competition. And I mean the global competition, United States, China, Russia. I see Germany and Greece and Britain and Belgium. They all talk what happened to them inside. They look very locally. What about the bigger picture, the global competition? I think that's the #1 issue that you should discuss and think about it, because the world is going evolutionally, like the plants or the flower or the human being. They're going the same direction. And United States is flying away. Russia's doing a lot of things. China. So that's,
Yes.
I don't hear enough about this competition.
Okay. Please, Professor O'Neill.
Okay. You can only say so many things in a paper. I was only supposed to talk for half an hour, but I mean, obviously I went on longer than that because of the time we had, because other speakers had withdrawn. When I wrote my paper, I was concerned with what I thought were the intrinsic problems facing the European Union. The question of the European Union in a global world is a different paper, maybe for a different conference, but I fully agree with you. I think that we've had previous conferences where we've dealt with these themes. We looked at NATO, we looked at the European Union as an international actor in a conference we had in Cluj-Napoca a couple of years ago. This is, you know, a major issue for the European Union, this whole question of its role in the world. We've got this whole question of the trade and investment partnerships that are being negotiated. We've got the competition from China. We have got a problem with Russia. You know, the new adventurism, as some people have called it, of the government, Putin's government in Moscow. These are all major challenges for the European Union, no question about that. But my focus in this paper was, if you like, on domestic issues, was on domestic concerns. Obviously, the question of Brexit, the question of the Eurozone crisis, the question of internal populist parties and the politics of insurgency. You're absolutely right. Maybe the next conference we have, we should be dealing with some of the global issues that are just as important. Energy security, climate change. I mean, these are all challenges. You know, the challenges don't just end with the 5 or 6 challenges that I identified. There are many more challenges. Even better then, or even more reason, if these challenges are coming thick and fast, even more reason that we should address the structural problems, I think, of the European institutions. If we can't handle domestic crises effectively with the institutions we've got, how are we going to be able to handle these major global challenges?
Thank you. There are more questions, comments? No? Yes, the last one, please.
My question is to Professor O'Neill.
One moment.
Thank you, sorry. My question is to Professor O'Neill. You mentioned cultural anxiety and the rise of insurgent politics as being an issue that we're currently dealing with. In the world now, we've got access to everything almost simultaneously. You can get numerous articles on Facebook and social media realms. How can we counteract this issue, because it is negatively affecting politics worldwide, not just in Europe?
How do we counter cultural anxiety? Well, we have to address the sorts of issues that lead to cultural anxiety. The referendum campaign in Britain is an example of that. I mean, I live in a small village just outside Nottingham. I go and do my shopping on Saturday morning in the local stores, and the stall is there right outside the supermarket. The Union flag, lots of elderly people worried about migration, worried about, you know, the stock phrase, we've lost our country, you know. You can only counter that kind of propaganda by challenging it head on, you know. We don't answer those anxieties, though, by pretending that there aren't issues. As I've said, you know, the pretense that everything's fine from Brussels, little local difficulty you know, can be easily resolved. You know, give Britain a few extra bits of sausage and everything will be fine. Cultural anxiety is a major cause of the politics of insurgency. It has many causes. I mean, populism is too, I think, looser term to describe it. As I've said, you've got radical parties of the left, like the Greeks. You've got Podemos, and on the other side, you've got Jobbik and Front National in France. These are all issues that have to be addressed and confronted. And this kind of insurgency, I think, feeds on ignorance. I'm very wary when I say this, that sitting up on a platform, being an academic, being a writer, teaching these sorts of subjects, there's a danger of hubris, of cultural arrogance yourself, that you know all the answers. Very much as the European Union has often said, everything's fine, no problems, just let's move on and let's, I think we need some humility. We need not to dismiss these people as a problem, they're all raving fascists or neo-fascists. We have to confront the kind of arguments these arguments are challengeable. We're not losing control of our borders. The United Kingdom is not being swamped by migrants. The only way to meet that kind of misconception is to deal with it head on. That's the political challenge. And as I've said, one of the most lamentable things, I think, in the British debate at the moment is that there's almost a reticence on both major parties to get involved because they're thinking about the next election. Are we going to alienate the Labour Party's thinking? Lots of working class people who normally vote for us, are worried about these things. So we don't want to tell them they're wrong in case they vote for UKIP next time. The Conservative Party is split down the middle over the whole debate. So David Cameron's view is, I want to say as little as possible because after the referendum, I've got to reunite the party. I think it does, take courage and political will to deal with these issues. Back to Mrs. Merkel, at least Mrs. Merkel has shown that kind of leadership. She might have made the wrong decision, but, on that particular issue, but somebody had to make a stand, and she made that stand. So credit to her for that. I'd like to see a few more European leaders being as courageous.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. Now, I would like to thank to both professors, O'Neill and Varsori, to thank you for your participation, for your presence here. And now I invite you for a lunch break. Thank you.